into this region, into the institutions, and into our people. But we must also be honest. There are constraints. The geopolitical landscape is shifting rapidly. Global fragmentation is redrawing trade routes and tightening capital flows. Debt burdens remain high for many African economies. Rising interest rates have pushed the cost of capital beyond what is affordable for many of us states. Climate shocks, from cyclones to droughts, continue to test our resilience, often hitting the most vulnerable the hardest. And while ambition is abundant, the infrastructure gap remains wide, and the fiscal space to fill is shrinking. This is a tension we must hold and navigate. We can neither sit back and allow these global currents to shape our future, or we can rise together as architects of our own destiny. Today, at this forum, we choose the latter. And I want to share something personal that continues to inspire me on this journey. One evening while I was playing my favorite game, I used to be an avid gamer a very long time ago. I was playing my favorite game called Uncharted. And I heard a line in the game, and the protagonist quoted T.E. Lawrence, and it stayed with me ever since. He said, "All men dream, but not equally. Those who dream by night in the dusty recess of their minds wake in the day to find it was vanity. But the dreamers of the day are dangerous men, for they may act on their dreams with open eyes to make them possible." That line sparked something in me. It made me realize that it's not enough to dream. We must dream with open eyes, with full awareness of the obstacles before us, and with the courage to act regardless. That's how the strategy of the DFRC was born. It's also why the DFRC is stepping forward boldly and intentionally to serve as the anchor institution for development finance in our region. Being an anchor means more than just providing coordination. It means being a source of gravity that attracts talent, knowledge, and capital. It means offering stability even when institutions face volatility. It means setting the benchmark, not just for performance, but for what is possible. And it means becoming a multiplier, bringing together MDBs, donors, and private sector partners through a single trusted platform that drives meaningful investment into the region. This strategy we are launching today is not just a plan, it is a call to action. It is centered on 4 clear areas of focus that reflect the needs of our DFIs and the potential of our region. The first focus is capacity building. We're establishing a development finance academy that will provide accredited training in critical areas like climate finance, blended finance, PPPs, impact measurements, and development finance leadership. But this is not just about training. It's about transformation. Through digital certification, technical upskilling, and a new leadership fellowship that places young professionals into real-world institutional roles, we aim to professionalize and modernize our DFIs. Our goal is to train at least 1,200 participants by 2029, with a deliberate focus on building gender-diverse leadership. The second focus area is policy research and advocacy. And I think we heard a lot said this morning about the importance of this. We are setting up a development finance think tank, not as an academic exercise, but as a practical resource to influence real policy outcomes. This think tank will generate knowledge that supports decision makers in areas like industrialization, trade, energy transition, and investment reforms. We will host regular evidence forums, produce policy briefs, and launch an annual infrastructure financing scorecard. Our goal is to ensure that DFIs are not just implementers of policy, but that they are contributors to policy. Our third focus area is resource mobilization. We are building a regional blended finance platform that can structure and deploy green bonds, gender bonds, and blue finance instruments. Together with the DBSA, we are establishing a readiness program that will enable DFIs to access concessional climate funding from institutions like the GCF, GEF, and CIF. And we are designing investor engagement programs to bring local pension funds and sovereign wealth funds into co-financing conversations. The fourth and final focus area is project preparation for regional impact. We are operationalizing a fully fledged project preparation facility, a one-stop project factory that will cut preparation time from an average of 7 years down to under 36 months. This will be achieved by creating an enabling environment for projects and programs to thrive. Through a real-time digital dashboard, we will give funders and policymakers a transparent view of the regional pipelines. Now, behind these 4 areas of focus are 4 strategic pillars that explain how we intend to execute. The first is rigorous execution. This pillar is about cultivating a culture of delivery at the DFRC, where commitments are honored, timelines are met, and results speak louder than plans. We are adopting global benchmarks not as a form of compliance, but as a compass to continuous improvement. Our systems, our governance processes, our reporting standards are all being shaped to ensure that the DFRC delivers with rigor, transparency, and credibility. The second is financial sustainability. By 2030, our target is to move away from over-reliance on member contributions. Instead, we aim to generate 30% of our revenue from advisory services, the academy, and data and research products, 60% from member support and contributions, and 10% from donor endowments. The third pillar is expanding regional impact. Every initiative in this strategy is mapped to the African Union's Agenda 2063, the AFDB High Five priorities, the AFC-FTA agenda, and the SADC Regional Indicative Strategic Development Plan. We will measure an impact not just on dollars spent, but in the jobs created, emissions avoided, and the value chains enabled. The fourth pillar of our strategy is built on collaboration. We recognize that no single institution can transform the region alone. That is why we are deepening our engagements with multilateral development banks and other strategic partners who share our vision. Our approach is to forge partnerships that go beyond transactional funding. We aim to co-create solutions, align priorities, and pool expertise to unlock capital and accelerate impact. These partnerships will support everything from project preparation to capacity development and will strengthen our ability to mobilize blended and climate finance at scale. By building trusted long-term relationships, we are positioning the DFRC as a collaborative force, bringing coherent and connectivity to the region's development finance landscape. But strategy alone is not enough, colleagues. We now need your support. We are calling on governments to collaborate with us in designing programs that strengthen national capacity. We're inviting MDBs and donors to jointly sponsor our think tank and help embed its research into decision-making processes. We are urging DFIs to second skilled professionals to a project preparation facility so that we can fast-track projects within the region and ensure that there's impact. And we are asking the private sector to co-develop blended finance instruments that align with your investment goals and our developmental mandates. This is an open invitation. Let us not sit on the sidelines. Let us co-create something that will leave a legacy of institutional strength and regional integration. Now, I want to leave you with one final thought from a book that I really love and cherish. It's called The Magic of Thinking Big by David J. Schwartz. And in the book it says, believe it can be done. When you believe something can be done, really believe. Your mind will find a way to make it happen. Belief is not about wishful thinking. Belief gives permission to act boldly. When paired with action, belief becomes a force of nature. And so, I ask you, colleagues, let us believe together. Let us believe in this region. Let us believe in our DFIs. Let us believe in the value we are capable of unlocking when we act in unity, with purpose and courage. Because the future we seek will not be delivered to us. It will be delivered by us, anchored by the DFRC, powered by the institutions present in this room, and sustained by our collective willingness to dream big and act even bigger. Thank you very much, and let the dreaming and the building begin. Thank you.
Another big round of applause for Zweli. Another big round of applause for Zweli. Some bold statements and affirmations. Africa is not Africa, our time is now. And Africa, the world is looking to Africa for solutions and the firm commitments and the strategy and the key pillars that the DFRC intends to hold. At this point, we will have a panel discussion, and I went a little over beyond the program earlier, so we'll get straight into that. So we're going to have a panel discussion. We're going to have a dialogue, but before we do that, we will have Zef and Leko to give us presentation on the economic outlook, to really see and give us with a sober mind of what we're dealing with and the landscape of our economy. At this point, let's put our hands together for Zef and Leko to take us through presentation on the economic outlook. Another warm round of applause for Zef.
Thank you so much, Director of Ceremonies. Good morning, everyone. I am going to proceed on the basis of the protocol that has already been established here. So I'm not going to go through the list, if you allow. This slide comes standard with my invite. It's about the DBSA. Normally, I would just go through it and say, oh, this is what the DBSA does, and so on. But today it's got a special meaning because the Executive Secretary, Mahosi, he said something fundamental. He said, this regional economic community does not have a dedicated DFI. And that struck me because the DBSA has got a continental mandate. So we operate across the continent. We facilitate infrastructure development and capacity building. As you can see, the bottom right there, 60-40 split, 60% in South Africa, 40% outside. We focus on the network sectors. We focus on the social sectors. But here's the thing. One of our strategic activities that the board has requested us to do is to look at shareholder diversification for the DBSA. Zweli, you say the vision for the DFRC is to accelerate inclusive development through empowered DFIs and integrated infrastructure. It's here. So I'm saying maybe we have found the missing dedicated DFI for the region. It's just a thought. It's just a thought. Okay, I was requested to deal with 3 specific questions to look at the outlook of the regional economy. And this is the first question that I was supposed to deal with. In other words, what are the pressing macroeconomic aspects or issues that we see? There are two things. I think the speakers that were here before have mentioned some of the issues. I just want to highlight those two. That one, I think we see a settling down of nations following the great election. And that's a good thing because, as we always say, elections, they come with a pause in economic activity. The year before and the year of the election, nothing happens. So this is a good thing. We really appreciate it. The second one, everybody mentioned, is the disruptions from the trade changes and so on and so forth. The World Trade Organization projects that trade levels will drop because of this in 2025. The second one is growth itself. I mean, we've all seen the IMF revising growth numbers lower. We used to be around 3.3, 3.5. Now, growth for this year is below 3%, global growth. And going forward, it's around 3%. Okay, personally, I think that was overdone, the revision, but I think the idea is right, or the economics of it is right. We will see a little bit of a decline in growth for this year and going forward. So that's the first point at a global level. Regionally, if you start from your left there, there's a bit of pull up in growth. Not as much as you would have liked, not as much as you would have preferred, but there is a moderate, call it a moderate improvement in growth. But if you look at the inflation interest rate story, that's where for me it becomes interesting, because the second chart there shows a declining inflation, cooling inflation. But the third chart, which is the interest rate, which is supposed to follow that cooling, it really hasn't. And I think, Zweli, you mentioned it. That dotted black line is around 6%, 7%, thereabout. The dotted red line, which is the inflation, which is the interest rate that is chasing or trying to respond to that inflation, is around 11%, 11.6 to be precise. Now that's too high, and the question is, why is interest rate staying this high if there's no inflation? And so that is the question that we need to deal with as a region. Yes, there are nuances. I mean, there's different levels and evenness, but on average, that's the situation. So as a region, we should ask the question, why is interest rates this high if there's no inflation? So monetary policy issue. That's the first in terms of policy. The second one in terms of policy is on the fiscal side. Yes, debt to GDP, sovereign debt, is improving, but very slowly. Going forward, you can see those bars are almost, sideways or stable, if you like. So the question is, how are we thinking about then revenue enhancement versus debt management? Because if this is the case, then this is what it's telling us. This is what it really means. If you take the fiscal impulse and assess what is the contribution of fiscal policy to growth. In 2020, so red is good, just because normally we use red to indicate bad. So in this case, red is good. You had fiscal policy supporting growth almost across the continent. A couple of years later, you can take the same picture in 2024, you'll find it's like this. You find that there is too much or over sensitiveness in terms of debt management. as opposed to how do we improve, the denominator. This is debt to GDP. The focus is on the debt. How do we manage debt? How do we reduce debt? The focus is moved away from how do we support GDP? How do we enhance the revenues to fix this? I do not see us fixing it by managing debt and talking about debt and so on. We will fix it by dealing with the bottom denominator. So that's the fiscal policy issue there. Then we were asked to give a view of how do we adapt to these things. So the DBSA has got 6 strategic initiatives. 3 of them, we call them value creation or value creating initiatives. And it's the municipality space, it is the transitions, and it is the regional integration. In the municipality space, we are saying it's not just about financing these sub-regions. It is also about ensuring that there's local economic development, there is support in terms of government so that they can deliver on what they need to do. So you don't just, because for a long time the DBSA used to go and finance and just sit back and watch the money coming back. So it's more than that. So you need to work with these sub-regions. In any event, this is where the people live, this is where the people work, this is where everything is happening. So that's very important. The second one on transitions, of course, we're saying, yes, transitions will happen with or without us, but transitions must be guided by our development objectives as a region, not by other things. No, we should transition to facilitate developmental goals of the region. The third one, of course, is the regional integration where the corridors and network sectors and trade and so on should be facilitated, to make sure that we all move together. The second ask or the second question was, how do we assess risk in this space? And this is the chart I thought I should show you. So I said earlier, we've got a 40% exposure to the continent, right? And by the way, that that white spot in between there, we're working hard. There's a railway deal that we're working hard. That must be blue. So we're fixing that. 40% exposure. This is how we read. This is how we see the risk. Low to moderate. So we totally disagree with this narrative that risk in the African continent is high, so high that you can't do anything. We just don't see that. This is what we see. And secondly, we are saying, in fact, this issue of putting out a narrative that says, oh, let's look at the nations in the continent and see which ones are the best, which ones can be invested in. It creates something like this at the bottom, where everybody then goes to the winners. And then capital doesn't flow to where it really, really needs to flow. Look at the, okay, this is a global picture, but it's the same principle. Look at the middle-income nations and the low-income nations. There's almost nothing going there. It's just maintenance. All the flows are going to the well-off nations. And that's not what you want to do. The well-off nations can sort of take care of themselves. You want the money to flow there. So that's the thinking in terms of the risk. Then. Secondly, in terms of risk, we are saying the risk must be determined by or must be in the context of the gaps that you see. So it can't be just, oh, it's risky, therefore we can't get in. We are called, we start with a D at the beginning, development finance, not any finance, development finance. And these are the gaps. We all know these gaps in terms of energy, in terms of transport. I mean, energy, we are saying 660 million by 2030 could still be looking for energy if we don't fix that. Our roads, about 50% unpaved. That's a huge gap. And the corridors that we're all talking about, we should get them going, not just Lobito, all of them. Water and sanitation. Africa still lacks the rest of the world and everybody else in terms of ICT penetration and access and so on. These are gaps that we know, but we agree. Risk appetite must be right. Project preparation is key. You can have the gaps. If you don't prepare your project properly, nothing will happen. So we agree fully with that. Then the last question that we were asked to deal with is, what sort of programs and instruments do we think about to intervene then as DFIs? And we see 3 areas. First area is the infrastructure space, of course. And I know that there's the regional network sectors and so on, which we have spoken about. But I wanted to give specific examples where you can use these programs as an anchor to draw private sector capital into the process and to anchor a process of industrialization through this. In the independent transmission process in South Africa, for example, we're saying there's 14,500 kilometers that must be built in terms of transmission networks. How do you use that as an anchor? So it's a massive infrastructure build. How do you use that as an anchor for industrialization? But how do you use that to draw private capital? I showed you the fiscal positions there, and many speakers here said that fiscus is constrained. Fiscus is constrained. Therefore, you need private sector money. Second program is in the transport space, the same principle. In the water space, the same principle. And I spoke about the municipalities. We feel very strong about municipalities. These programs, they make sure that it's not just a once-off project, but they also make sure that there's a process, a long-term process of capital flows from the private sector. I know that this is national, but it's the same principle regionally, if you think about it. The second one, as we see as an important tool to intervene, is trade finance. And the case has been made. I mean, there's low intra-Africa trade. In fact, people say the correct level is around 45, 46% and more intra-trade. We're way below that in terms of the continent. The trade demand that we have identified, running into hundreds of billions, the SMEs that can benefit from that kind of support, and the opportunity to actually drive the SDGs that the Executive Secretary was talking about. So this is the second piece that we think is very important. The third one, of course, is the critical minerals argument. People are saying about 30% of the verified reserves of critical minerals are here in the continent. In fact, they argue that almost all of it is in SADC. So this is an area that needs to be explored, and I saw in the program there's a dedicated conversation on that. So those are the 3 areas that we think should be taken forward. This is an important one because it's not only on the extraction side, but there's a whole manufacturing conversation that we need to have. Here are the strengths that we think should be leveraged by us as a group. We can finance stuff. We can finance stuff cheap because we are able to go to other DFIs and get concessional funds. So we can raise money at market rate minus, JIBA minus. We can drive this issue that Zweli is talking about on the thought leadership, on the dialogues, the advocacy thing. We have to do that because sometimes our governments do things that, we need to make sure that we drive that. at the policy level, at an operational, at the technical level, at all levels. Then the third one, of course, is the blending that says, yes, we understand that the fiscus is constrained. How do we then bring in other funds, private funds or the global green funds and so on and so forth? I mean, if you look at the case of South Africa, there's 61% of the non-interest expenditure goes to the social wage. We're left with about 39–40% to do all these nice capital formation things. That's not enough. That's not going to work. So you need to bring in, private sector and other players. Let me end here. As DFIs, I think we are properly organized, and I think we have set ourselves some goals. We met in Cape Town on the Financing Common. This was all the DFIs in the world. They were there. This is what we came up with. We said, can we agree that we will jointly push the issue of inclusive investments? Can we agree that we will focus on making sure that the projects are well prepared and we fund those projects together? And can we make sure that we mobilize resources in a very cordial and interoperable manner amongst us and between us and other players in the financial sector, whether it's the multilateral development banks, the commercial sector, and so on. So I think this is important to keep in mind as we seek, to resolve some of these things and to take, some of the conversations forward. Colleagues, I think that's what I wanted to share as a scene setter for our panel. Thank you.
As he took us through the tremendous opportunity that exists for us as DFIs, he took us through the economic overview and the fiscal realities that we're dealing with, strategic development anchors that DFIs hold, access to affordable capital, policy influence, and long-term infrastructure funding, and really the DBSA's continental risk appetite, exemplifying how proper project preparation, risk management, and frameworks and bankable pipeline can enable successful infrastructure delivery. He also spoke about, just really the position that Africa sits, the next frontier. There are opportunities for the African continent, and it's the minds that are in this room that can make it a reality. So we're going to have a conversation, and we had already introduced Zeph as a chief economist under the DBSA, and this is just really the beginning of a conversation. We trust that post this conversation, we can interact and connect and get further insights and put it and scope it down to our respective DFIs and how we can create value. The next speaker that I'm going to introduce, who will be our moderator, who will be leading this next session, is Felicia Fanakiso, a finance manager at Nosad Capital. She's a chartered accountant and a finance professional with expertise in development finance, SME financial inclusion, and strategic financial management across Southern Africa. She currently serves as the finance manager under Nosad Capital, a very purpose-driven investment firm that supports private sector growth in the region. We've seen the work that Nosad Capital has done in the region, and it's through Felicia's team that we're seeing it as a reality. Let's put our hands together for Felicia as she comes. She brings in sharp analytical lens and passion for sustainable Africa-led economic growth, and she's especially committed in scaling and advancing African SMEs. Africa, our time is now. Another big round of applause for Felicia. The next panelist is Toru Homa. I spent the whole evening trying to get this name right. I hope I got it right. Toru Homa is a senior advisor, private sector development under JICA. He's a senior advisor to the CEO of AUDA NAPID. Mr. Homa is a distinguished professional with over 3 decades of experience in private sector development, investment promotion, trade, and industrial policy, currently serving as a senior advisor to the CEO based in South Africa, where he spearheads initiatives such as the Africa Kazine Initiative, Homegrown Solutions Accelerator, Policy Bridge Tank, and regional integration efforts under the Africa Continental Free Trade. Let's put our hands together for Mr. Toru Homa. Another big round of applause for Mr. Toru Homa. I hope you're as excited as I am. And then the next speaker is Etienne de Souza. I hope I got that right. He's an economic advisor under the United Nations Development Program. He has over 20 years experience in economic and social development. He's worked for the UNDP for more than 15 years at the regional and country level, providing evidence-based context appropriation of policy advisory services and leading progress. He focuses on formulating and implementing national and sectorial development strategies and plans to advance the sustainable development agenda and inclusive growth in sub-Saharan African countries. Let's put our hands together for Etienne de Souza. Another big round of applause for Etienne. So we had a long debate over tea as I was trying to convince him to go down to take a picture. And by the time we got there, the picture had already been gone. Welcome, sir. Let's put our hands together for him. The next speaker, one of our panelists is Liang Wang. He's a resident representative of the World Bank. Mr. Liang Wang is a country representative for Botswana and is based in Gaborone. Mr. Wang leads the World Bank's engagement in Botswana that includes an active lending portfolio, a vibrant knowledge partnership, and a dynamic dialogue with the government and wide range of stakeholders. He's a Chinese national. Mr. Wang brings over 15 years of experience working at the World Bank across Africa, East Asia, corporate and policy function at the headquarters in Washington, D.C. Let's put our hands together for our illustrious panel as they take us through a panel discussion of how respective institutions respond to economic challenges. Thereafter, we'll have an open discussion, sector-focused project discussion. We'll then have the breakaway sessions that I'll announce afterwards. Over to you, Felicia.
Thank you very much, Serolame, for the lovely introductions. Very colorful. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this discussion that we'll be holding today. It's very relevant to the presentation that Mr. Zef has just made. And today we'll be discussing how respective institutions respond to economic challenges. Some of the economic challenges, just to maybe bring it in and summarize from Mr. Nhleko's presentation. These include the tariffs that have been imposed for some countries, and that affects the trade level and the trade growth. Interestingly, what I found was the cooling inflation, but the interest rates remaining high because of the different monetary policies, and that the sovereign debt is improving, but very slowly, and the debate between debt management versus revenue enhancement. On that note, we're very excited to talk about this today, and we hope that this is more than a conversation. Our panelists bring deep expertise from different angles, including development banking, multilateral advisory, international development cooperation. So this really creates an opportunity for us to reflect, an opportunity for us to collaborate and to really navigate this volatility and the challenges highlighted together. So just to get the conversation started, I think Mr. Nhleko highlighted that, developing the private sector is important, and that it's important for us to develop that sector to deal with the various challenges that are faced. So the first question to Mr. Toru Homa, who is the senior advisor at in private sector development at JICA. So the question to you is, given JICA's role that they play, what are some of the, sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. In order to drive private sector resilience, how has JICA adapted its engagement model to ensure continued support for the private investment and SME development?
Thank you. Thank you, Felicia. Good morning, bonjour, bon dia, muito bom dia, Dumela. Am I covering certain part of SADC region? As introduced, my name is Toru Homa. So today I speak on behalf of JICA. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Yes, and JICA is working on private sector development, so-called. JICA has recently, a few years back, set the 20 global agenda, so-called. This is something like the issues which we cover. It is such as education, health, infrastructure, water, sanitation. And one of the 20 areas is private sector development. Especially in Africa, we highlighted two comprehensive programs. One of them is so-called Kaizen. I'm not quite sure have you heard about this word, but this Kaizen is a quality and productivity improvement approach, yes, and practices which are disseminated in all over the world, and especially in the manufacturing factories. Toyota is one of the most famous ones, but not only like that. In any sector or any country, any size, so that is adopted. That is what we are working. And in Kaizen, so JICA has been working in Africa from about 20 years ago. By the way, in Asia, so 40 years ago, starting from Singapore. And so in Africa, 20 years ago, we started. And now the countries which are adopting this Kaizen approach to enhance the competitiveness and quality and the productivity in their especially private sector, these are growing. Number of the country are growing. Most recently, 41 countries of Africa are adopting or doing something related to Kaizen. So that now we need a kind of continental-wide approach that is called Africa Kaizen Initiative, Africa Kaizen Initiative, AKI. So this initiative is a joint initiative between AUD and NEPAD, African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, and JICA. So we are working on a continental-wide. So this is something like doing networking, standardizing, and doing the center of excellence so that we can share the knowledge, accumulated the experiences to share with other African countries or other private sectors. So that's what we are working on. And so far, it works very well. And according to our recent survey, so the 64% of productivity increase in 64%, and decrease 56% of the defect ratio at the factories, and 38% decrease in terms of the lead time for production, so such and such. This is one of the efforts which may contribute to the private sector in Africa, including SADC, including Botswana. In Botswana, Botswana National Productivity Center is the core to implement this. And the second program, which we are working, especially after COVID-19, because there are a lot of needs to solve the social challenges under the COVID-19, then after that, the world conflict right now, and so on and so on. Especially we are highlighting startup. So the supporting ecosystem building of startup. So we call this project is Project Ninja. Ninja is not Ninja Turtles. But it's just an abbreviation. And the next innovation with Japan, but we call it Ninja. Yes. So this is supporting the startup in the private sector for their the innovative approach and ability to solve the social challenges in anywhere, medical, health, mobile tech, agri-tech, whatever. That's what we are doing. So these two, especially JICA is currently working on in the continental wide. So in the SADC region as well. Okay. I stop here, thank you.
Thank you for that insight. I think it's quite important that, you know, as has been mentioned by our different speakers, that we not only provide finance, but we provide the tools and the efficiencies that can be driven to help the private sector scale up. So that's quite interesting, the Kaizen project. So I'm sure you've worked in a lot of countries where there's been economic downturns. So how has JICA developed given these challenges, and what kind of tools have been used in the different downturns?
Okay, thank you very much. So these two comprehensive programs is itself are tools to solve, and we don't provide directly the finance itself. We are starting some specific program, but so I will come up to this for later questions. And essentially, so we are supporting from the technical cooperation aspects, so that they have a good, strong resilience. Resilience is the very important term, so that they can work even under the economic downturns. And so those are already testified in the, for example, last time in the COVID-19. So Kaizen has provided for example, Kaizen itself doesn't need a lot of budget money. Rather, it saves money. And so less investment, it works. That is valued under the economic downturn situations.
Thank you for that. Thank you for those responses and for informing us about the Kaizen initiative. So one of the key things to recognize is that private sector resilience really depends on an enabling environment, which includes strengthening country policies and framework. Now, the UNDP works very closely with governments on socio-economic resilience. Mr. Etienne, this question is for you. In your view, how has your economic advisory function evolved in the recent years to support countries dealing with inflation, debt distress, or supply chain shocks?
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. Let me take opportunity as well to thank the organizers and. As UNDP globally, we have two main functions. One is the advisory services that we are provided to the government. The other one is we mobilize resources to implement a program and project for the benefits of the communities of our host government, of our host countries. But particularly when we come to the advisory services, through let's say the latest strategic plan of UNDP, the strategic plan 2022-2025, we are seeing a shift in the way that we are providing our advisory services. As you may know, usually UNDP primarily is working on the long-term development planning. Now we saw a shift where we are integrating a crisis preparedness and crisis response. This is not where we usually worked, but since this new strategic plan, taking into account the fact that, let's say, the world is facing uncertainties and shocks, then now we shift our advisory services to integrate this aspect. That is one thing. So basically, what does that mean for countries that we are supporting? We are much more supporting countries now with strategic foresight. for the development plan. Let me take a quick example. Last year, we supported the National Planning Commission here in Botswana, capacitating the leadership as well as the planning officers to infuse how they can use strategic foresight for the NDP 12. Those are the things that we are doing to make sure that by using strategic foresight, they integrate in the development planning, in the planning process, the shocks that can be overseas. That is the first thing. The second point is that we recognize that these shocks are deeply interconnected. So somehow, we are no more providing our advisory services based on specific aspect. We are using an holistic aspect, a system thinking approach to provide our services. Let me take one or two examples. On the debt stress, for example, debt distress, for example, what we are trying to do now is that we are shifting from just debt management to integrated financing solution. The presentation from my colleague, the introductory presentation, was showing what are the solutions that we can use. That is what we are doing now. We are supporting government to not addressing only the debt management issue, but using integrated financing solution approach. That is how we are shifting in our advisory services. If we take the supply chain, for example, as well, we are moving from generic trade advisory services to strategic diversification, specific diversification and localization strategy. He was talking a few minutes ago about local development. We are trying to shift when countries are facing supply chain shocks, we are trying to shift to that approach because we believe that local development, regional integration will be the solution to those kind of shocks. In Botswana, for example, we are supporting the government we support the simplification of the agreement, the trade agreement that the country signed, whether it's the AFCFTA, whether it's a
We deliver our mandate through some of the following key state-owned enterprises. The Ministry of Trade and Entrepreneurship has about 12 SOEs, state-owned enterprises. But the ones that I will mention here are the ones that will be interacting with you most of the time. The Botswana Investment and Trade Center, BITC, the Citizen Entrepreneurial Development, this word is always giving me problems. Citizen Entrepreneurial Development Agency, Special Economic Zones Authority, Companies and Intellectual Property Authority, as well as the Local Enterprise Authority. You will receive presentations, short presentations from these entities, from the CEOs shortly, just to give you a taste of what they do. The focus areas of our ministry: entrepreneurship and enterprise development. We support startups and scaling ventures through structured business development programs.
How the policy is being formulated. So, Etienne, in that sense, then how do you balance urgent responses with long-term structural reforms? You know, given the challenges we're facing, there's a need for something urgent to be done, but also at the same time, we need to ensure that there is proper long-term structural transformation. So how does the UNDP balance that?
Okay, thank you, Patricia. We use, as UNDP, I will try to share a few approaches that we are using in our policy advisory services to the government. The first one is what we call the dual track approach. Meaning that we explicitly design a parallel track intervention where we have a urgent response, and through this urgent response, we are trying to infuse, to lay the ground for long-term intervention. I would like to give one example to explain what I'm talking about. Like when we are in a situation of inflation, for example, or we are in a shock situation in a specific country, we scale up the cash transfer to community, the cash transfer program. We use the cash transfer program to start the reform on the ID reform. This, there is a clear link in how we are responding to the shock and using that shock to start the reform for the long term, for the structural constraints that the country is facing. One example is what we did in Togo during the COVID response of the country, where the government decided to provide cash transfers to vulnerable households. Then we used this opportunity to advise the government to start an ID reform. And that started during the COVID response, and then after COVID, they then formulated the new ID reform in the country. One other example, what we are also trying to do is that we use the crisis as an entry point for reforms. We all know that a moment of crisis and are painful. Even though it's painful, it can create a political will in the country. So we use those opportunities to advise the countries in how they can use the crisis response to lay out a response for the structural reform that they want. And also during the COVID crisis, we tried as much as possible that our approach was build back better. There is a crisis, but the intervention should facilitate a build back better approach, where it's not like just responding to the situation, rebuild what is destroyed, but by building what is destroyed, we try to infuse a possibility to have a sustainable approach, sustainable development approach, sustainable infrastructures when it's come to rebuilding the infrastructures. So that's how we are supporting the countries when they are facing a shock, and how we are using the crisis situation to address the structural transformation, to address the structural constraint challenges that the country are facing.
Very insightful, very, very insightful. So I can see that the UNDP, you collaborate with different agencies and institutions. We know partnerships will get us there. Together is better than one. So Mr. Liang, how can institutions like the World Bank, DBSA, JICA, and UNDP better coordinate their responses to ensure alignment and to amplify impact?
Sure, thanks, Felicia. Let me say a few words, just listening to my co-panelist. First of all, I do think we do need to have a shared understanding of the macroeconomic environment we are in. I think Zef's picture was really an excellent one. But let me just add a few points from the global point of view. I don't want to sound like a doomsayer, but to a large extent, I do think the crisis we are in may be different from the crisis we've experienced before, right? For the bank, we issued our global economic prospect in June, and we do a 6-month update. So the 6-month update that just came out projects that the global growth is 2.3%, and that was 0.4% down from January, right? So that was just 6 months below. But of course, 6 months was a long time in this time in the time we're living in. But that's really, really critical, because if we do look at our projections for the next 2 years, if our projections are true, that means for the coming 7 years, from 2020 to 2027, this 7 years, the world's growth will be the lowest 7 years in a new decade since 1960, right? So that's the kind of global environment we are in. Now, coming to Southern Africa, Zeph, let me just build on your presentation. The bigger economies in the sub-region is still growing at a fairly unimpressive rate, so if I may put that away, right? When South Africa is growing, the growth is hovering around 1% below and above. That has significant implications for other countries. For the countries like Botswana, when South Africa is growing at 0.7%, we cannot expect more SACU transfers, right? So that can only be a downward trajectory. And for a country when the SACU transfer counts for almost 30% of government revenue, that is very significant, right? So I do think the kind of global environment we're in, it is not a pretty one, and that really does shape the operating environment for all the DFIs, but more importantly for the governments themselves, right? So that leads to my second point. So what can government do at this point to formulate a plan, to formulate a strategy, and to balance the short term and the long term? And I want to borrow Turu Jikas strategy. Maybe government has to be Kaizen and ninja at the same time. What does that mean? When you don't have enough resources, the only thing you can do is to be sharper on your focus, is to look at your spending items to say whether you are getting the bang for your buck. I think there are some commonalities among the Southern African countries in terms of spending. Maybe this is the time to look at some of the efficiencies, whether the state SOEs are pulling their weight, whether some of the money goes into different industries. Are they playing a role? Are they generating the kind of growth? Zeph, to your point, are they generating the growth that you're hoping to generate? If they are not, then you do have to look at that. Otherwise, the ratio just doesn't add up. Are some of the social protection programs, are they sufficient? Are they efficient enough? Are they addressing the poverty and the inequality many of our countries face? I do think those are important trade-off decisions for government to make. And whatever decisions the government make, that does create the kind of operating environment for DFIs and for all the multilateral institutions like myself, like others that are sitting on the stage and sitting in the room. Finally, coming to your coordination point, I do think at this point, the more specific the organizations can be in terms of the issues to coordinate on, it's really, really quite critical. I think it's great the SADC-DFRC is convening the platform today. It's very encouraging to see on the agenda there are some specific topics on the agenda for discussion. I would say, let me just jump on what the Deputy PS from the Ministry of Energy said this morning. I do think topics like energy offers a perfect entry point, a platform for DFIs to sit together, because they are not only growth generating, they do require a large scale financing. They also require different scales, different types of financing. They require different instruments. that requires different coordination among different countries, and countries are playing a role whether you're buying or you're selling energy. So I really think topics like this provide the perfect opportunity for DFIs to working together, particularly at this time when the fiscal resources are constrained and all countries want new drivers of growth.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Wang. Yeah, you painted a very real picture of what's happening in Africa, but I don't think it's a time for us to feel sad. I think it's a time for us to innovate, and it's a call to action for us to build the Africa that we want to build. Mr. Wang, do you believe that, as DFIs, are we leveraging our platforms for joint programming and knowledge sharing effectively? Are we really partnering the way that we should be?
No, I think there's tremendous opportunity for all of us to do more. I think some platforms works better in some countries, in some sectors than others. From a close distance, to me, the energy platform in South Africa seems to be working relatively well and in supporting the energy transition of South Africa. Of course, South Africa is a larger economy, so there are more partners there. Maybe the need for coordination is quite large. But from a distance, it seems to me it's an area, it's a platform, seems to be working well. But again, to return to my previous point a little bit, the energy is a good topic for us to work on. Countries like Botswana has aspiration to be an exporter. Now, of course, there are also other countries in the region have the same aspirations, right? So there is a need to really discuss and decide to some extent what's the best way to sequence some of the generation capacity. Now, once the generation capacity are on track, you do need all these other infrastructure links to be in place in order for the energy to be exported. Then you need a committed buyer on that side to buy the energy. Everybody looks at ESCOM to say, look, South Africa is that huge consumer that's open to buy energy from other countries. And that's really critical discussion to have. But of course, in other countries like Zimbabwe, like Zambia, there are also potential resources, both as importer and exporters. I think it's really important for these different pieces to come together, not only for the countries who are trying to sell, also important for the country who are trying to buy. So I do think topics like energy requires all of us to come together. And last point, I think is Zef's point, in terms of financial instruments, I think more and more there are different financial instruments that are being offered to the market. The direction that the public finances are insufficient to finance all this. So the more leveraging impact the public finance resources can play, the better. The guarantee products increasingly playing an important role. My institution is offering a balance guarantee platform that offers different type of services for different segments in the market. There are other instruments. I think the direction of more blended financing using public finance to leverage private resource to meet the large financing needs is really important as we continue to coordinate and join efforts.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that. I think what's key is to innovate and to also look at the data. What is the data really saying, and how can we leverage and have similar data platforms that can inform decisions and lead to partnerships? So, Mr. Zef, you have something to add?
Can I intervene?
No problem.
So, I cannot let the economic projection go unchallenged. So I agree with Mr. Wang that the direction of the economics is wrong. But let me repeat again, I think the revision is overdone. It's simply baking too much noise into the forecast. And I mean, if you look at the continent, the eastern part of the continent is still a 4% economy. 6-7% on average still. Therefore, I don't believe that it's that bad. But also just have a look at the previous forecast and see how they have done in terms of actuals. You know. So I thought I should make that point. I'm not disputing the direction. The direction is wrong, and we should attend to it. But I think the forecasting is simply overdone. Those quarterly projection models are just wrong. They give wrong answers. So
an economic showdown. Okay, thank you for that. Zeph, you mentioned earlier about how project preparation is key to a lot of the project financing deals that are done and the infrastructure financing deals. One of the things that we need to do is we need to be able to innovate under pressure. And I read that the DBSA has a project preparation program. Are you able to just tell us a little bit about that? Because I found that very interesting as one of the innovative tools that can respond to economic pressure.
Yeah, we do. The DBSA is one of those, call it unique DFIs, because we cover the entire infrastructure development value chain. We don't just finance, we help our sponsors to plan projects, and we prepare projects, we finance. We also build projects on the ground. Not many DFIs do that. We've got a team of 130 engineers and lawyers and so on to build projects. And then we also do maintenance. Most of the key national points in South Africa maintained by the DBSA. I mean, right now we're rebuilding the Parliament precinct. That was burned down. But coming back to your question on project preparation, most of the time, the failure of infrastructure projects stems from the preparation process. If projects are not well prepared and properly prepared, then at some point they collapse. So we have created a project preparation unit, and in there is something we call a super PMO, project management office, that deals with these things to try and bring together the different aspects, to set it up properly. Whether we fund it or somebody else funds, it's not the issue, but to get the pipeline going. Because, as I said, we know these gaps. We talk about these gaps all the time. We see these gaps in our localities. The question is then, why are these things not fixed? If there's a pothole, why is it not fixed? Well, nobody has prepared a project to do that. So it's quite key. It's a fundamental thing to do. And I think I agree fully with Zweli that let's think about the resource center as a project prep hub for the region. Then we can all participate and contribute and so on.
Thank you for that. I've also seen a lot of deals. We do a lot of project finance deals at NOSAD, and they always take much longer than what we would have budgeted. So I think the project preparedness program is very good. Mr. Homer, at JICA, are you able to share any financial instruments or programs that your institution has developed specifically to respond to economic pressures?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for the questions. Just recently, so the government of Japan introduced the very first, as Japan, very first grant aid that provides some kind of risk money to the national startup fund to bringing or to promoting, mobilizing the private sector's fund. So that is set in Nigeria just recently. I think this is kind of things may contribute to that kind of innovative the finance approach. On the other hand, so it's rather traditional. So in Botswana, so JICA is considering to prepare the two-step loan to provide for the SMEs, small and micro and medium enterprises, especially so considering the economic downturn, the situation of that. So those kind of the traditional approach is also there. In the overall, yes, we need to consider, as Mr. Wang mentioned, so some kind of the coordination is very important. So that, for example, the other money which we are doing is the African Development Bank Fund, so EPSA code, which is the co-finance scheme. So likewise, also from the aspects of the African continental the agenda, so the coordination among the stakeholders, DFIs, governments, international organizations is extremely important in this for that. So that this SADC-DFRC and DFI network, I hope this works very well. I would like to learn more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. And how might some of these innovations that we've spoken about be scaled across the different regions and sectors? Anyone want to take that one?
The innovative financing, right?
Yes, how to scale across all the regions.
I think we can, I do think that we have let's say, two ways to do it. The first one is to, let's say, use regional integration investments, opportunities to, let's say, scale them, those innovative financing mechanisms across the region, a specific region. That is where the SADC, institution like SADC is important, The other one is also providing a knowledge platform for countries to learn from each other. I'm taking an example of one of the blended financing that countries are using right now is the green bond or SDG bond, those kind of financing. We have countries that are ahead in using this kind of financing mechanism. So in the sub-region, we need to learn from those that are using them and provides the opportunity for those that want to use it to really understand how it can be done and how to quickly, not going through the same, let's say, same route that the previous used to issue those kind of bond, but take advantage of lesson learned by the one that already use it and quickly use those new financing mechanisms. So that's the way that I'm thinking. And I do think that institutions like ourselves, UNDP or the World Bank, we can provide this space for, let's say, the region, for the government in the region to learn from each other. Yes. That is possible. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you. And I think just finally, just the last question to you, Etienne,
go ahead.
Is, how important is it to reframe development finance in these times? I think we've heard a lot today about, how DFIs need to step up, how we need to do better, go beyond just providing finance. So how important is it to reframe development finance in these times?
Oh, thank you, Patricia. I think reframing development finance is not critical, but it's existential for us, particularly as African countries. It is existential. We are actually in a situation globally where it is projected that the ODA, based on the commitment from the ODA providers countries, the global ODA will decrease for around 20%. From 2025 to 2026. So it means somehow that for countries like ours, we need to totally change the approach. And that is what we are trying to do. We are trying to provide advisory services to countries that we are supporting to change the perspective, to crowd in, private sector, to use blending financing mechanism that exists right now, to leverage on those possibilities to mobilize more resources, and particularly also to not use any more project financing or program financing, but to use the opportunity of integrated financing mechanism, integrated financing framework. And the basis of that is the domestic resource mobilization. That is very key. So we are providing the support that we can and to the government to use those opportunities. So we are not doing it alone, as I was saying previously. We are doing those things in partnership with the World Bank, with the IMF, and with other institutions that are in the development landscape. And I do think that this the need for reframing the development financing is become a reality. I know that in the coming forum for the development financing forum that will start in few days, we participated we supported let's say the committee that is preparing the outcome document, and we make sure that the need for reframing the development financing mechanism is put in the outcome document. And we hope that it will be approved by the countries, and then it will become a kind of commitment, not only from the countries, our countries alone, but across the world, so that we can now start leveraging on those let's say, opportunities for our countries.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think for me, what's very clear is that, the traditional models of how we do development finance need to change. They're no longer sufficient. We're not building the better Africa that we want to build. So we need to rethink how we finance, what we finance, and who is involved in the process. So that for me is a key lesson just from what we've heard this morning. So I would like each of our panelists just to take us through just some lessons for the future, based on your experiences and institutions, 2 lessons that could guide future preparedness and resilience. We can start with Mr. Wayne.
Yeah. So I thought I should start. Let me start with the point that the quality economic models doesn't work. I think I'm not disagreeing with you on the quarterly projections. And I think this point is particularly challenging to predict or project, because a large amount of the drivers of this downturn is the uncertainty, right? A lot of the trade policies are creating a huge amount of uncertainty that nobody can understand. We have a milestone coming up sometime in July, and people don't really know what to make out of it, and to a large extent that does drive that overcorrection in many aspects. But I think in this really uncertain environment, Felicia, linking to your question, if the DFIs, the policy advisors, are advising the governments to sharpen their focus, to be more productive in the process, to be more cousin, to be more creative, to be more innovative, to be more like ninja. I think the DFIs needs to do these things ourselves, and I think that's really our own way to redefine development finance. Do we really need to do all the things we used to do? What are the ones that are really generating the impact we intend to achieve? What are ones that are generating the growth the countries want to see from the project we are financing? I think that's really quite central. And while doing this, how are we financing this? what are the instruments that we are really putting forward to leveraging, to be more impactful, and ultimately to generate the kind of growth, the kind of jobs that all the countries are dying for. I think that's really should be the fundamental mission that the driving DFI is going forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, for me, maybe just 3 things. The first one is I wanted to come in when you were talking about the scaling question. Mm-hmm. The scaling question, we need to approach it in a way that says, what has been developed that works, and take it, scale it, and not try new things, to scale, because most of us as DFIs, we've developed working processes, functional systems, and so on. So take that and then scale it to wherever it's scale. So that's the one. The second one is the partnerships. I know that we say partnership is good, smart partnerships, collaborate, and so on and so forth, but the way we've thought about it is you can't be stuck. You can't be hamstrung by people who don't want to work with you. So you need willing, traveling partners to be working with you. We call it the coalition of the willing. So work with those people that are willing to take the thing forward. Other people can join, but don't get stuck. It's partnership, but with a certain mindset. The third one is this sustainability question, where we are saying, yes, take a long-term view, because most of us as DFIs, we're not addressing things for tomorrow. We're planting trees where other generations will sit in those shades, not us. So take a long-term view, and perhaps that's where I come from with this forecasting thing that says, yes, there's noise, there's aberration in the system, but what is the long-term trajectory? How do you see things going forward? And use that then as your North Star, instead of, creating volatility in the system. So those 3 for me, I think, are quite key for the rethink of how we do our job. Thanks.
With the evolution of sports, we have seen many sports alike aligning towards the business proposition that which their sporting codes present or come up with. Football has been one such sport that has continued to grow over the years and indeed have more commercial value. But with that commercial value comes a bit more of responsibility unto those that govern the footballing game. We've seen football increase in terms of a number of games that footballers would play on average per season, from as little as 30 from the late 1990s towards 38 in the early 2000s. Today we speak of a footballing season that sees average football professionals playing well within 50 to 75 games a season. The big question therefore becomes, is this healthy for the footballer or the average footballer? We also talk this afternoon towards the image rights of footballers as we descend on the WAFCON finals, that is the African Women's Cup of Nations, which will be in Morocco. We look at what is it in it for the players in terms of image rights, advertising that will come about as this particular property of CAF engages later on in the year. Obviously, Botswana will also watch as the AFCON finals place center stage to the World Footballing Gallery. However, this afternoon, we're joined by FIFPro Secretary General Africa, that is Khosana Masaseng, to discuss these matters and more in terms of FIFPro's view on these matters and indeed how these can be resolved. Khosana, good afternoon, and thank you very much for making time to speak to us this afternoon.
Good afternoon to your viewers, and thank you for offering us an opportunity to engage.
the evolution of the game of football has seen so much commercial value come into the game and definitely become a factor. The commercial element has now become a factor which affects the playing element, that is the health element of the players. From your point of view as FIFPro Africa, and indeed as FIFPro as a whole, what is your view on the commercial growth of the game vis-a-vis the health of the players?
Look, I think from where we sit, we've realized that the exponential growth of the commercial properties around football has taken away the livelihoods of players on the part of their health. The demand is too much. So the way in which this has happened is that in the international space, there's no room for new competitions.
Yes.
So there's a phenomenon now by FIFA and other football authorities who tend to increase the number of matches. They expand the competitions. So this has an effect on the competition formats. They are changing, and they put a whole lot of demand on the part of the players. From an engagement point of view, players are even getting fatigue, psychosocial elements kicks in. They need those type of support. So the demand is just taking a toll on the players as we speak.
We talk of these elements of their health that you highlight on just briefly, but I want us to expand on, you know, the psychological and mental element of the game. We are in a month where we are speaking to mental health for men. And we look at cases that are there, or perhaps maybe let's look at cases that have been there where players in the yesteryears, we can talk about the likes of Jabu Pule, who were affected by the fact that they played for a Kaizer Chiefs team that played on average 45 games, where others were playing 32 to 34 games. Let's look at the mental aspect in this regard to say how much pressure does it bring upon the players themselves, and indeed translate that to what product we see on the pitch.
Look, we can agree that at the ongoing Club World Cup, you can see the level of commitment of players. You can see the energy levels. They are not up to the scratch that we would have wanted. You'll remember that the leagues just came to an end in May. And in June, the guys take Europe, for instance. I'll come to Africa.
Yeah.
In Europe, they were playing the Nations League. After Nations League, they go on to play the Club World Cup. After the Club World Cup, they go pre-season, the league starts, the qualifier starts, and the AFCON in December will be played by our guys. Yeah. Take Sundowns as an example. They played almost every competition in South Africa. They played Champions League to a level of finals, right? Now they went straight away from the season, Champions League, and now Club World Cup. They come back, they need to start pre-season. And they are liking that this season we didn't have the Africa Football League, which was going to add to the dilemma of this match schedule. So the international match calendar is so congested and doesn't give players one time to rest. And again, the demands on the level of the competition. I mean, there's huge investment in the game, as you spoke about the growth in the commercial space. Now, this talks to one thing. The demand is on the players to deliver.
Yes.
And along the way, they play at different time zones, at different weather conditions. It's hot in the US now. Yeah. They come back, they were here, it was winter, they go there, they come back to winter. So these are sort of the demands that the competitions are putting on the players. And then this is where we need to support players. But in some teams, or leagues, we don't have these deliberate mechanisms where you engage players one-on-one, you check on their health. We did a survey with the Dutch university that showed us that a lot of players now are putting emphasis on the need to have psychosocial support because the game is just too demanding. You can imagine you play in Spain, there are racial abuses that you face every week, the demand of the competition, both national team and club football. So the expectation become too much for the players. The funders of this competition want highly competitive tournament. The funders of these teams demand a lot. The coaches want players to go all out. And I know of English Premier League coaches who have complained about this insane match schedule. Yeah.
But let's look at the remedy now. What could be the remedy? Because we're talking of one case here where there's an overload of games for your Mamelodi Sundowns, for your Manchester City and all these. Like, let's bring it home where it seems as it's the opposite. It's a download or sorry, not download. It's an overload on the other case and an underload on the other case where we play 30 to 42 games per season, which then affects our competitiveness when we get to your African Cup of Nations and so forth and so on. The difference between the two upper leagues and lower league systems, where do we strike a balance? Where does FIFPro want a balance to be struck, and what is that balance?
The balance we ask for is a harmonized international match calendar. That's all we ask for. And if our leagues and federations and confederations are smart about this, one, you must grow the domestic leagues. I find it very disturbing in a way that FIFA would want to commercialize the Club World Cup more. You know what that will do to our African Champions League or the Champions League in Europe or other parts of confederations? It takes away the competitiveness, because more money goes to the Club World Cup. And now there's even indications of having it every 2 years. So we are saying, let's harmonize the international match calendar to afford domestic competitions to grow. You see, football can never grow down, top down. The approach is that it must be bottom up. You do this because this is where you get your players in league competitions and cup competitions. So once you help the league, say in Botswana, for instance, to develop other properties, sell them, then the league becomes more professional, then you can attract more sponsors, and then relatively you'll be sitting at 60 games a year, excluding national team competitions. Now with this, you'll be highly competitive to play with whoever. The challenge then comes when you want to take away the growth space that can be exploited by domestic leagues, and then you focus it much more on the international space. That will certainly kill some of the leagues. They will never rise to a level where we are. The reason why we have teams in South Africa playing competitively is because of the domestic format. But at the same time, it's a disadvantage because a team like Sundowns gets to play a whole lot more, and some of the teams still in the same league are not playing the number of matches that they are playing.
So inherently means that for teams that play more, they will get commercial value, yes, but over and above that, the gap between, what I would call Africa and Europe will still widen, because their commercial value is allowing them the latitude to have more games in between, and hence the gap between African teams, or Africa keeps drawing back.
And the consumer patterns in Africa are such that you look at Sundowns, Pyramids, Ali, Esperance, Wydad, Mazembe. These are the big spenders in the continent, and these are the teams that will only attract better commercial value.